Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Hard Things Podcast. This is your host, Blaine Burgess, and this is episode 72. It's going to be called Mailer Daemon. It's a very strange name for some people who maybe not so tech savvy. But I promise I will get around to explaining it. This episode is about a week late. As usual, if you've listened to the podcast at all for a long amount of time, you'll know that I go through creative spurts. I'm also in chiropractic school, and I recently had a lot of practicals. Basically, right now is like crunch time. It's like the Super Bowl of this little section of school. I am right around halfway done and only have 2 more trimesters of roughly about 8 months of like classroom school left, after which I'll be interning for another 2 and then off to the races in the real world, licensed and ready to practice chiropractic. So it's a little bit of a wind down period, as well as it was ramp up period to the practicals. Went in and did about as well as I could hope for on a lot of them, and now it's more of a wind down. So we have some finals next week. I'm very fortunate to have secured a minimum of a B in a lot of classes, like about half my classes already. So I really don't have much to worry about. With the final, it's really going to be a test of what I learned this trimester. So I'll study a little bit. I'll read some study guides, but it's not going to be a mad dash to the finish to get points to try and, keep myself from failing a class or trying to get an A when I don't have it yet. A couple classes I have A's in, and a lot of classes I've secured B's already. So very stress-free finals week. The maximum stress kind of just happened, just peaked. And with that, I say all that to say that my creative process wasn't necessarily interrupted, but it was ground to a halt, to a halt a little bit. I had, thankfully, a lot of good insights before these kind of practicals popped up, and had a good idea of where I was going for this episode, and really, thinking about desire. There's so many layers to desire, and I am kind of following a track. I've done a little bit of a light theme through all the podcasts of the different aspects of the kind of Eastern mystic chakra system. And that's also how I'm thinking about this book, this desire concept. So starting out in the book, we're kind of in the base of the spine, or the kind of the volcano, the raw energy. Last week's episode, the creed, just kind of being about desire, and it's like the desire to have desire, or the desire to release it. So once we kind of get around to the fact that, like, okay, nothing is true, everything is permitted, 2 questions comes to my mind. So, how do we safely, go after our desires? Like, how do we, take risks, but not overly so, where you bottom out or die? I mean, like in life, there's no failure you can't come back from, other than death. There's a couple that are pretty permanent, but, how do we kind of figure things out as we're supposed to, while also just being mindful of, things that could ultimately take us off the path entirely. So there's that. And there's also kind of a little bit about what desires, like we come born with some natural desires, and then I think there's a little nature and then a little nurture. Like nurture is like socially, like what do people desire in our society? What are people already desiring when we are born? And we grow up and we see these desires and we kind of pick and choose which ones we like, which ones we don't like. For one reason or another, people will kind of pick and choose, avoid some like the plague and take on others, to a degree where like the person won't be stopped. So I just find it really interesting at people's core, not only what they choose like internally, but also what they express in the world. That person could show up to several different people in different ways and represent their desires in different ways. So it just becomes infinitely complicated inside of one person, and that's a good way for someone to sow confusion and kind of create a little chaos so they might be able to take advantage of something. But what I've found with desire is as lame as delayed gratification can be and can feel, I've truly learned that it's the only way to truly get what you want or to truly have a chance at it. Because if you do manipulate somebody into getting something, and they like subtly know. So there's, people in this world that maybe don't have some kind of power or status, or even just characteristic. Maybe you're, in terms of power and status, are on the same level, but one person's a man, one person's a woman, for example. One person's the boss, one person's the employee, but both are the same age and have about the same amount of money in the bank account. Like, there's these little power imbalances that allow us to leverage short-term gain, but we don't think about the future. We don't think about the long term. And so one way, when I think about this, I mean, you could probably already hear a hint of it in my voice, and this is something that has been a topic that I've always wrestled with intensely, is sexual desire. We're talking about the lower energy centers of the body, the sacrum. It's right in the middle of the pelvis. Even just saying the word pelvis, you start thinking about what resides there. And, sex makes people uncomfortable. It's very powerful. It's very taboo. It's very, people that express it confidently can make people upset. People that express it in a way that it wasn't meant to be expressed, makes people upset. There's a lot of ways that we kind of botch this as human beings, especially in the Western society. So the reason the episode is titled Male or Daemon, a daemon, it looks like the word demon, there's an A in it. And so when I was a kid, I, started messing around with email, and I thought computers were the coolest thing ever. I was like learning. I was probably the first generation that may have had the computer in the home, where like a lot of friends had it. Like we were doing AOL Instant Messenger, and I'd say over half the kids in school had it in like 6th, 7th, 8th grade, and we were maybe even earlier than that, like 4th and 5th grade even. So not only are you passing notes in person, but you go home and then you like put up an away message and express yourself and kind of subtweet people before Twitter was even a thing. And then you can message somebody and they can leave you on red, and like it just creates this whole like storm, this whole extra like drama. And it was fun. But I got an email. I remember one time I like mistyped an email, and you get a message back from Male or Daemon. So Daemon in computer science is just a background program. Mailer daemon being the email daemon. So it does something automatic. So when you send a message to an address that doesn't exist, like a typo, whatever, you're going to get that bounce back message letting you know, like, hey, this didn't reach its intended sender. Like, do what you must. You correct the issue, or, whatever. Maybe they gave you the wrong email. You can figure it out, which I think is a cool little feature, because you could send emails into the void and never gets to the intended recipient, and that can be frustrating. So there's a lot to unpack with this concept. First and foremost, I think of like texting and social media and all these things that we do, like leaving people on red and posting Instagram stories and blocking, unblocking, unfollow, like all these things I know that people do, that I talk to people about, things that I've done to people on social media, and like how much it doesn't really, it's not a good use of our energy, but it's a use of energy that allows you to not be vulnerable, and it doesn't ask you to dip into the energy that I'm about to talk about. So thinking of sexual energy, I think a lot of people think about sexuality in a specific way of like sexual desire is like, you think about like being in love and having a lover, and you think about casual one night stands, you think about all this range of sexual activity, and people kind of lump it all in together. But my experience of it, I've had encounters from knew the person for a couple of hours to knowing the person for years, like decades basically. And the amount of time you know someone doesn't necessarily quantify the connection. In my experience, it's the amount of presence that both people are able to like step into. So when a lot of people think about sex, I think it's easy for our brains to just wrap our minds around the libido. Libido is just like the kind of the id, the drive to procreate, continue our bloodline, whatever. And if we actually think about like love and desire, it's a little bit different. So libido is one thing, and I think libido can be housed within the kind of, you would think of the word erotic and you start thinking about porn, and it's really been hijacked by porn, because erotic is not porn. Erotic is not libido. Erotic is not, it doesn't even necessarily mean that you have to be in love with somebody or you want to marry them, or like it's more of like this person or thing. It doesn't even have to be a person. It doesn't even have to be sex. The erotic energy, or eros, is something that inspires you to be so present in the present moment that you just put all of your energy and time like into that space. And if two people can do that, that's a very deep connection. If a room, like a boardroom full of people does that, that's going to be a successful business. If a whole NFL team does it, that's going to be a Super Bowl. Like, you have people channeling this power, this erotic power. And it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with sex. Although you may see these people have sexual prowess, because it can be part of it. Libido can be a part of it. Attractiveness to others, that having that desire and that presence and that attention to detail, and just really being with people. Like, you just get in a room with someone and you make them feel like you're there, whether you're just friends or your family or your loved one, like in a relationship. It's just irreplaceable. That kind of connection is something that is very valuable, but because it is so valuable, we also, I think, sometimes the stakes feel too high, or the connections feel too intense, feel a little scary. Reminds you of a time where you went there before. So people touch erotic energy, They touch their own power. They touch the power of others. And basically it's like, in my mind, we've taken this super powerful, basically like unconscious or subconscious creative power, and we've just morphed it into this small subsect of it. Like libido is just a fraction of what eros is. So what I've found is, I think the profession of chiropractic has called me forth to, when I am learning about it, when I am, thinking about my future work, what am I going to spend 40 to 80 hours a week on in my future? It gets me out of bed in the morning. Like that power of something I'm going to do years from now. It gives me the power to like move today and to become that person that's going to be able to do those things. And so that's the like erotic power. It's like being excited about a future state and doing the work you have to do now. Like it's something that can fuel you, because kind of the dark side of all this is, like I was saying, when people repress this stuff, when they get scared of it, oftentimes what happens is they without that fuel source, without being able to tap into it and to flow with it the way you need to really be successful, you run the risk of just needing other fuel sources. So I think we see sickness and different pathologies, we see mental illness, like all these different things are a product of not being able to harness this energy properly, not being able to express it properly. And then if you're using it without knowing how to use it and you hurt someone, you might hurt their ability to use it. And then we're all just like kind of hurting each other and not, when in reality we could all be using this power responsibly and, with the respect of it, like not the fear of it, but just respecting how powerful it is. And the fact that you can do real damage to someone, the fact that you can also be a real benefit to someone, just knowing how important it is to try to get it right. And even just being aware of it, consciously trying to use that power for good, or for, I say good, judging good and bad is not a practice that I'm trying to continuously maintain right now, because doing something bad, for example, like the movie Batman Begins, he goes overseas and he's stealing from Wayne Enterprises. He's stealing to learn how criminals think. He wanted to live with them and, immerse himself in that. So it's on the surface wrong, but also he's stealing from himself, and he's serving this future purpose of being Batman, which is a vigilante. So he breaks laws, but at the end of the day, he also saves Gotham. So the ends justify the means a little bit, and it takes a very specific person to not allow yourself to, take something like that and allow, like, you're either the hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. And a lot of us become villains, and then once you become a villain, you're faced with a choice to either own up and take responsibility for what you did and atone, or you can kind of double down on being the villain and just try to be less of a villain than maybe another villain and call them out and kind of virtue signal, like, hey, well, that person's worse, so I'm not that bad. And you can kind of gaslight yourself into thinking that, you're not that bad and that, you're okay. And really, it's just hurting yourself, and then it's also hurting the people you come in contact with who are genuinely trying to do the right thing, because you're not able to right the ship and harness that energy and go in the right direction. You can really get in trouble. So I say all of that to say it's a little bit of a new concept I've really come around about way. But I want to get back to Daemon. So, Mailer Daemon. I told you what Daemon is in computer science. What it is really in history. The Greek mythology, Daemon is like God, godlike, power, fate. It denotes an unknown super factor, kind of the X factor. It can be good or hostile. It's kind of neutral. Demon or demonic, like typically you go to evil, but I think that's where, maybe modern Christianity has been twisted a little bit, because back in the day it was more neutral and you could take this energy and do good with it too. And inevitably as humans we're flawed, so we're going to do some good and some evil, but I think striving to do good and harnessing this X factor is really, if more human beings did that, we would get, greater results collectively, I think. So in a very roundabout way, I'm kind of saying that this is all like a little bit of a misunderstanding. And one way I think some popular content authors, whatever you want to say, has tried to rebrand it is like, Joseph Campbell, the hero's journey. Like a daemon is like, I think of a demigod like Hercules. It's Zeus's son with, a human mother. So this person is human and flawed, but also has the power of a god. I think that's a little bit of the story. Like that's how it was supposed to be understood. Is it all comes down to your choices. So when you're pursuing your desires and you get these little choices along the way, you have to shape yourself into like, I want to get what I want. Like, for example, my future chiropractic practice, of course, I want to be successful. I want to help people. And if I help people the way I know that I can, with harnessing this power, this kind of X factor that I believe all humans have, if I learn how to harness my X factor as best as I can, I'm then going to benefit financially. And everyone in our society, because money is kind of the goal, it's a universal goal right now, everyone wants to benefit financially. But when I benefit financially, I know I'm also going to then be able to donate my time more. I'm going to be able to, use my resources to even expand the good that I'm doing for people. So as you can tell, it's like it's a little bit of a necessary evil. Like you have to have money to do things, and you have, to get money, someone has to give it up. And ideally, you use the X factor to deliver, kind of over deliver on that currency. Like if someone is paying for expensive chiropractic care, I don't want them to leave thinking that they got less than they bargained for. I want them to leave going like, man, I got a little bit above and beyond what I thought. I'm going to send my friends and family here. Not to mention, I feel really great. And just using the X factor to expand. And you'll notice that like nothing I'm talking about is sexual at all. It can be used sexually, but it can be used professionally, in your family life, like all kinds of ways. So a little bit of what this chapter is going to be about is like reclaiming the word desire and erotic content from libido. It's not libido, it's not sex, it's not the physical body even. Like I think of erotic, it's just the way that you show up, it's a presence. There's a reason people like Pedro Pascal and all these different Hollywood actors. I think they use their X factor to deliver emotion to people, to make them feel seen, and do their art. And that's why we love Hollywood so much. But Hollywood also has this massive dark side where they use this X factor for darkness. So I think you just have to be really, really careful. Like the X factor is so powerful, it gets so big so fast, and it can spin out of control. And as such, it's really kind of talking about the id. When I got back to a little Freud there, it is this raw power, like not thinking of consequences, like all these different things. So we think of it as dangerous or maybe leaning evil, but it's just so essential. It's so powerful. It can drive you to do great things. You just have to kind of put a harness on it. You gotta, and I know it sounds a little bit like BDSM. We're getting back into, libido land, but you do have to just focus it. You have to focus that energy. And I'll speak from personal experience. When I focus it properly, the more I use it, the better I get at it, the better responses I get from people that I want to join me. If I'm at school and I got classmates and I want to study something or I want to work on adjusting, you come across people, and certain people will react to you, kind of with an open posture, and maybe they have a little bit of the eros in them as well, and they're inspired for chiropractic. They want to get better at this, and you feel the same, and you find this, this person that has the same goal as you, and then it's all about just like channeling that energy between each other, and it's really limited based on the person. How much can people keep up with each other? And I've seen some really beautiful things happen. I've seen it go really, really bad. And chiropractic school is an interesting place too, because a lot of people have healing energy. They want to help people. Like I was just saying, they also want to make money. And we do also go into a massive amount of debt. So it throws a bunch of fear into this eros equation, the X factor. And fear just can't exist there. It does exist there, but it has to be, you cannot mix it with the X factor. If you mix it with the X factor, it turns into a monstrosity, which it usually ends in like avoidance or just straight damage. So I think a lot of our society is dealing with this in business and relationships and family. Like, we're falling apart a little bit because we forgot how to channel this power. And my hope is the next couple of episodes, these chapters of this book, I'm going to be able to flush out these ideas of how I think we can better channel this power to basically see our desires all the way through. And then as a result, you get positive and negative consequences. And that's what makes the world go round. The mixture of those consequences for all people, if we're all operating at peak X factor, I think it's my theory that that's going to be the best outcome for humanity. And I think so far, in terms of design, as much war and awful shit has happened to people, I also think it was by design. Like the balance that humanity naturally finds, is perfect. And the thing that messes it up, that genuinely fucks it up, is us. Us not channeling the X factor properly. And so if we can all realize how powerful we are and channel that power, toward a better future. Like, I think over the years, there's been less violence, and it still shows up in insidious ways, but, more so than ever before. I mean, the population's growing, so we're, creating less people than we're killing, and it's gotten to this like fever pitch. And now, like, if we are consciously using the X factor to solve problems, to invent things, to think about the future and the future that we want to see, like, we can create it. Like, if you can see it, you can create it. And right now, we don't necessarily agree on what that looks like, or like who gets access to what and who deserves what. But one thing I can tell you, if you want to be on the side of getting what you desire, all you have to do is learn how to harness the X factor. So the rest of the episodes following this and the rest of the chapters of my eventual book are going to be my best tips on how to harness it that I know at the age of 35. Someday maybe I'll put out another edition with a little extra notes from additional learnings, because I definitely don't know it all, but I've learned enough to know that people aren't necessarily thinking about this concept on the level that I am. I meet someone every now and then who, it's like every time I share these ideas with someone, they know what I'm talking about and they can feel it and they understand, and they can agree to it to some degree with which their, religion or whatever lets them agree. And it just feels right. Like, they're just like, yeah, okay, that's a good concept. And it's something that everyone wants to say. Maybe not everyone has experienced fully. And to experience it fully is to know it, and to know how important it is. Like, it's just so important while we're here to use it. Like, you have access to this body and this weird, all-consuming hunger, this power that can bring things to life and create, and to not use it all up before you check out and go to the next place, is just insanity to me. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to have not used it thus far in your life. But I just got to the point where I'm like, all right, I got to do this, and I got to do it well. I got to do it now. And share it with others. Because it's genuinely overflowing. It overflows. Like, once you unlock it in yourself, it overflows and inspires other people, and then they, come out of their shell and do what they were meant to do, and that brings more beauty into the world, which is what we need. Just point blank. So until next time, be beautiful, and I'll come in hot with chapter 3. See y'all later.